So our first exploration, our warm-up, says solve x squared minus 16x plus 64 equals 100 using square roots. Do not work ahead of me on this one because I'm going to show you what to do. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to factor, just add it to the pile. Let's put it on the ground. Thank you, dear. We're going to factor this left side, x squared minus 16x plus 64. Take a second. I want you to factor that side. Just factor that side. So let's see. It's plus second, so that means the signs are the same. The minus is first. That means this is which sign we use. Starts with x squared, so it'll be x and x. Anybody get the answer yet? What'd you get, Amar? Good. So he got x minus 8, and then he took it one step further, which is correct. X minus 8 squared equals 100. So this question says to solve by using square roots. In order to solve by using square roots, I have to have a perfect square on the side that is x so that I can square root it. So you see now this entire side has a squared on it. So the entire side can get the square root. But if I do that to one side, I have to do it to the other, and I have to include plus minus. So I'm going to get x minus 8 equals plus minus 10. And there are two answers. There is x minus 8 equals negative 10. X minus 8 equals positive 10. And I can solve each of these for x by adding 8. I add 8 to both sides. Then I get two answers. I got a negative 2 and I got an 18. So what we just did is we kind of combined factoring and square roots together to solve this one. So there are 3 student practices. I'm going to just work through them. I want you to try 1 or 2 of them. If you need to watch me do I'll talk through the first one and then you try the next 2. Okay, so doing this again, I'm going to factor x squared plus 4x plus 4. And both signs are positive, so that means both signs are both positive. I'll have an x and an x. And 2 and 2 works. So I get x plus 2 squared equals 36. Then I'm going to square root the perfect square, both sides, put in a plus minus. I get x plus 2 equals plus minus 6. Now that means I have 2 answers. X plus 2 equals negative 6. And x minus 2 equals, nope, just kidding. X plus 2 equals positive 6. Take away 2. And I get -8 and +4 as my 2 answers. So anybody have any questions about these steps? I'm just going to work out the last one silently so that you can try it on your own with having to think. Questions. Questions could be, how did you get the number 20? Where did you find an 11? Okay, I am recording this for anybody who needs to go back and rewatch what I did. I'm recording this. Down here I have starred. It says complete the square to make a perfect square trinomial. Complete the square to make a perfect square trinomial. The perfect square trinomials, let me highlight what a perfect square trinomial is. Perfect square trinomial is a trinomial, 3 terms, that when we factor it, make a perfect square. So 3 terms factored becomes a perfect square, something like a plus b squared. That's a perfect square trinomial. The 3 terms. And so we had 4 of those so far. We saw perfect square trinomials. And we factored those before. Okay, so we're going to go to example 2. Example 2 says, find the value of C. So we're going to find what C equals. That makes x squared plus 14x plus C a perfect square trinomial. So we have to be able to factor x squared plus 14x plus C so that it becomes x plus something squared. We have to know what C is. Anybody have an idea? Yell something out. A number. I heard it. Yell it louder. Yes, it is a 7. No, it's not a 7. But 7 is in here. It's not a 7 that is C, but 7 is what it gets factored to be. So if we do an x plus 7, and we do an x plus 7, we do the outer and the inner, we get 7x and 7x. That makes 14x. But what is the C value? Amar? 49. How about number 4? You can think about, it's got to be x plus something and x plus something. That makes it x plus something else squared, but we need to know what C is. For this to be a perfect square trinomial, both of these numbers have to be the same. How do we get what those numbers are? Do you have it, Amar? Do you know what number? What number is it? Oh, you're way ahead of me. How do I know what number goes here and here? Or here? What two numbers do I add together to get 8x? And what did you get? You got 4. So what Amar did was he took 8 and he divided it by 2. And you got 4. Then how did you get 16? Which is correct. You took that answer of 8 divided by 2 and you squared it. You got that answer 4, you squared it. That's what you did. Let's do that again. This one. Since it's a minus, they're both going to be x minus. So I'm going to have x minus something squared. And I'm going to find C. Jacob, do you think you can help me? Do you know what C is, or do you know what the numbers are before I get C? The numbers are 1, or C is 1. Both, you are right. Okay, so what we had to do to get that first answer is we had to take this -2. And we had to divide it by 2. We had to find half of it, which was -1. And then we had to square it, which is 1. What we're doing here is we are creating a formula. And that formula is actually on the other page. I skipped over it. But for ax squared plus bx plus c, and actually let me get rid of the a because this does not work when there's an a there. For x squared plus bx plus c, c is equal to take the b term, divide it by 2, and square it. That's what c is equal to. So for this one here, I'm going to take my b term, divided by 2 squared. I'm going to take my b term, which is -9. And I'm going to divide that by 2. And then I'm going to square it. So this actually does not divide evenly by 2 unless you're using your calculator, which you get -4.5. Okay, I am not going to use my decimal because my next job is to square that answer. I'm just going to look at it as a fraction because it's going to be easier. When you square a fraction, you just square the top number and the bottom number. So -9 times -9 is positive 81, and 2 times 2 is 4. So that's what C equals. If I do this, I most likely have to use my calculator, but I don't want to be completely reliant on something that doesn't make me think. So if I need the decimal, I will use my calculator, but I don't need the decimal. I can use 81/4. Out of these three examples, which one seems the most difficult for you to find the C value? Four, 5, or 6. Which one's the most difficult for you to find the C value? 4, 5, or 6? Yell it out. 6. Why? Somebody's light bulb just went off. Why? No light bulb? I thought it was light bulb. Corey, why does number 6 seem the most difficult? Because there's a fraction. Why does number 6 have a fraction, but the other two didn't? Amar? Because the middle term is odd, right? If we have an odd number here, if we have an odd number there, this is going to be yuckier. If it's even, good. It's odd, yuckier. Okay, so we're going to solve the quadratic equation by what's called completing the square. So I'm going to go through all these steps that we just did, and I'm going to put them together in what's called complete the square. So this is the official new method of solving equations. Step 1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move the third term to the other side. That's 7. And as you guys are watching me do this, you'll notice I purposely left a big space. So my first step was move the C term to the other side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this side with, yes, you guessed it. No, you didn't. You guessed it, a square. I put a square in there. And now what we're going to do is step 2, we are going to complete the square. We're going to complete the square. Complete the square means, what does C equal? To make x squared minus 10x plus C a perfect square trinomial. What does C equal? If you're not sure, we just went over a formula. It says to do b over 2 squared. That's my C formula, b over 2 squared. So my b value is, Jaden, what's my b value? -10. Thank you for including the negative. So -10 divided by 2 squared. Sierra, what's -10 divided by 2? -5 squared. Aya, what is -5 squared? -5 times -5. +25. I have completed the square. That's what goes in that C spot. Now what I did is I just added a number to one side of an equation. Am I allowed to add a number to only one side of the equation? No, if I do it to one side, I got to do it to the other. That's why there's a square on the other side. So if you add a square to one side, you got to add the square to the other side. That is complete the square. Step 3, factor the perfect square trinomial, which we were just doing right above there. So I'm going to have that x minus something squared. So what is that number that fills in this spot here? Warren, do you know what that number is that fills in the spot here, hon? 5. And actually it's -5, but I already put the negative down. Okay, to get that number quickly, it is this number before we did that last step of squaring it. It is that number right there before we squared and got the 25. That is that number every single time. And then on the other side, I'm going to do -7 plus 25, which is 18. 18. Did I do that right? Yeah. So we just factored. Our next step is solve by square roots. So we completed the square by finding the missing number. Then we factored it. Now we're going to solve by square roots. So all this stuff that we're doing is stuff we've already learned, with the exception of completing the square. That's the new thing today. So solve by square roots. I'm going to square root, both sides, which means I have to put a plus minus in. And I'm going to have x minus 5 equals plus minus square root 18. And we were practicing this a little bit in our assignment that's due today. The square root 18, is there a perfect square that comes out of that square root 18? What times what makes 18? Ryan, is there a perfect square that goes into 18? 9. Times 2. Good. So now I have x minus 5 equals plus minus 3 square root 2. Brene, what should I do now to get x by itself? To both sides? Yeah. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. Can I, and I don't know how much we talked about this before, can I add 5? Can I add 5 to 3 square root 2? Did we talk about that yet? I feel like we haven't talked about that yet. Now, that should be from a previous course, but adding 5 plus 3 square root 2 is the exact same thing as adding 5 plus 3x. Could I add together the 5 and the 3 in this case? No, because they are not like terms. So I cannot add together the 5 and the 3 in this case either. You can't. So you have to write them separate. So we're going to have just that 5 in front. Then we'll have plus minus. We'll have 3 square root 2. So our two answers, this is our two answers, but if I needed to separate them, like if I'm typing in them in Canvas, my two answers would be 5 minus 3 square root 2 and 5 plus 3 square root 2. Why would the minus 1 come first? Say it a little bit louder. Least to greatest. Perfect. So there are cases that you saw on the front page where when you separate them, you can add and subtract them, but sometimes you can't, and you just have to leave them separate. Okay. I'm going to skip ahead and I'm going to do one of these student practices before I do that. Actually, know what? Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to skip ahead and go here first. Okay. Let's do 8. Well, no, let's do 7. Sorry, I couldn't make up my mind. Okay, so I'm going to go through these steps that we wrote above. And the first thing says to move this last term, the C term, over. Just move it out of the way. So I moved the 8 over, I got negative 8 on the other side, and I opened up some squares. That is my reminder that our next thing is to do is complete the square. C equals. Take the middle term B divided by 2, square it. C equals B divided by 2 squared. So B is negative 4 divided by 2 squared. So negative 2 squared, which is 4. But if I put that 4 on one side of the equation, I got to put the 4 on the other side of the equation so it stays equal. Okay, then I get to factor. Factor that perfect square trinomial. It's going to be x, and then that number that I had before I squared it goes here, minus 2 squared. On the other side, I add these together, and I get negative 4. Okay, after I factor it, then I do square roots. So I'm going to square root both sides, and I have to put in a plus minus. Let's get x minus 2 equals plus minus square root negative 4. Okay, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to look at that square root negative 4. Ketsia, can you help me with the square root negative 4? I cannot hear you. Oh, negative 1 and 4. Yes. Sorry. She said, let's separate it to have negative 1 times 4. Excellent. So now I'm going to separate that, and I still have that plus minus in front. And everybody together, synchronized. What's the square root of negative 1? Wow. Really? What's the square root of negative 1? I. Okay. So now we have x minus 2 equals plus minus, ooh, what's the square root of 4? 2. The square root of negative 1, I. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add that 2 to both sides. And I'm going to put it in front of the plus minus 2i. And I'm going to ask you the same question I asked before when we had square roots. Can I add together the 2 and the 2 from the I? No. This is a real number. This is an imaginary number. They are not like terms. They have to stay separate. So this would basically be my 2 answers right here. If I needed to write them separate, then it would be 2 minus 2i, comma 2 plus 2i. Another one of those? Yeah, let's do one more. Okay, x squared plus 8x minus 5. So I'm going to add the 5 to both sides. And then I'm going to put in my square. So that's telling me what to do next is I'm going to complete that square. C equals b over 2 squared. So I do 8 over 2 squared, which is 4 squared, which is 16. Then our next step is to factor. After we complete the square, then we factor it so that we get x plus, and if you're not sure what goes there, it's just the number before you squared it. X plus 4 equals, x plus 4 squared equals 21. So now we square root both sides. Macy, square root of 21, is that a perfect square? What can I divide 21 up by? 3 and 7? Are those perfect squares? Is there a different way of dividing up 21 besides 1 and 21? No. So if I cannot divide up 21 into something that's a perfect square, that's as far as I can take square root 21. So it's going to stay as square root 21. So all I have to do now is minus the 4. And I'm going to write that negative 4 first, plus minus square root 21. That is both answers combined. If I need to write them separate, I would have negative 4 minus square root 21, negative 4 plus square root 21. I think next week, or maybe Friday, we're going to actually connect this stuff to graphing. I'm not really showing you what all these numbers mean on the graph yet, but next week we'll put a connection to it. But to work our way connecting to that, so right now I'm skipping a few of these, which I might cover next class, depending on how much time we have after our quiz. I'm going to go to this example 5. Example 5 says if we remember vertex form, where H and K make the vertex. When it's in vertex form, we can find the vertex of the quadratic, and we also can find transformations. And we can graph it quickly with transformations. We spent some time looking at vertex form at the beginning of the chapter. The last chapter. Yeah, chapter 2. It was all last chapter. My bad. I had to think for a second. We're at chapter 3 now. Chapter 2, we spent some time on that. Okay, so because we did spend time graphing that and in vertex form is very, very helpful. We can use complete the square to take an equation that's not in vertex form and then put it into vertex form. So I'm going to do this using complete the square. And I'm going to do it the same way that we were doing it. Complete the square. So we have a y here. It is not a number. It is a y. We're going to leave that y there. And I'm going to add in, nope, I'm not going to add in. Just kidding. I'm just going to leave a space for a second. Have that y there. I'm going to leave a space. I have my x squared minus 12x. And what do I need to do with the 18? Same thing we just did on the last examples. What should I do with the 18? Jaden. Move it to the other side. So I'm going to subtract that 18 to both sides. So I'm going to have minus 18. And then we can add in our square. So this is the exact same thing that we did before. We're going to complete the square by doing C equals negative 12 over 2 squared. Or negative b over 2 squared. Negative 6 squared, which is 36. On the left side, I now have y, and then I'm going to take negative 18 plus 36, y plus 18. And on the right side, I'm going to factor it. X minus 6 squared. Again, we get the minus 6 from this right here. We are writing this in vertex form, so there will be a y when we are done. It's going to say y equals. How can I make it say y equals? Subtract the 18. So I have x minus 6 squared minus 18. So our vertex for this quadratic, when we were to go graph it, would be at positive 6, negative 18. Do that again. So we're going to write these into vertex form. This one also has an 18, so I'm going to start by moving that 18 over. And then we're going to complete the square. We're going to take b, which is negative 8, divided by 2, square it, which is negative 4 squared, which is 16. So on my left side, I've got y minus 18 plus 16, so y minus 2. On the right side, I'm going to factor that, x, and then I use this number, minus 4 squared. Add 2. And write the vertex. And questions on any of these? Complete the square steps. How I got the vertex. Where did I get a 16? Why did I add it to both sides? Why do you always use pink? Any questions? How was your weekend? Do you have plans for Christmas? Nothing. Nothing? No questions? Okay. I'm going to silently do 14 and 15, and I would like you to try 14 and 15 and look up to see if you're doing it right. Look up if you have questions. Call out my name if you have questions. If you're afraid to speak, just like wave. Okay? I'm going to do it silently so it's on the video.